Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of Entrepreneurship Matters. My name is Alicia Wilson. I'm Vice President for Economic Development for Johns Hopkins University and Johns Hopkins Health System. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this edition, which is all about tech. And you're going to hear from two of the foremost institutions, I would say, in the tech space in the country, but certainly in Baltimore in the region, and you will hear why in just a minute. We know that successful entrepreneurs, successful businesses are not built in a day. It takes a long-term commitment, sometimes multiple failures, a lot of grit to make it happen. And the two entrepreneurs that we'll be talking with today are no different. Let me first introduce you to John and Pava. I'm going to give you their bios, but not do justice to their journey, but we're going to do that over the course of the next hour. So really glad to have you all here with us. First, John Fosters. He is the COO of Fearless Tech. He is the partner and COO at Fearless Tech, a full stack digital services firm with a mission to create software with a soul, solutions that empower communities and make a difference. As one of the company's first team members, John has been a driving force behind Fearless's growth and impact. There's always something happening in Fearless. I can testify to that. And he manages the day-to-day controlled chaos that is growing a digital services firm that's taking over the world. And he makes sure all departments are in the know and working together. Welcome, John, to Entrepreneurship Matters. And next is Pava LaPere, CEO of EcoMap Technology. This is a rapidly growing tech company that creates platforms to help people navigate ecosystems. EcoMap's platforms helps thousands of people explore everything from Baltimore's tech community to the entire AR, VR industry. And they work with clients spanning local nonprofits to companies such as Meta. Before EcoMap, Pava founded and ran the student accelerators at Johns Hopkins University, a low-code development agency, and two nonprofits focused on building entrepreneurial ecosystems at the university level. She is passionate about hyper-local-led economic development and spends her free time designing websites, digging into economic sociology, and reading. Welcome, Pava. Welcome, John. Come on screen, and so we can jump right into this conversation today. So glad to have both of you on. So the first question I have, and I'll start with you, John, which is, what inspired you to want to be an entrepreneur? So where did that fire in the belly come from? Where can you pinpoint?
Yeah, thank you first and foremost for having us on. Like, I really do appreciate it. This is an awesome, experience here. And my story, it's a little bit different than what traditionally happens for most entrepreneurs, right? Most entrepreneurs like know exactly what they want to do in the world, right? And they're driven to it. My story is a little bit different in that, like, I walked in not knowing that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? And had experiences along the way working with some other companies that said, hey, like, this is what I want to do in the world. This is my why, right? This is what good behaviors look like for getting to success for me personally and for the people around me. And I think that has kind of formed my impressions or opinions about like what it means to be an entrepreneur. So I started off working for some larger consulting companies, and you learned some good lessons, learned some hard lessons along the way, and ended up teaming up with one of my best friends in the world. Went to undergrad together. His name is Delali Dzirasa. If you don't follow him on any social media stuff, please do. Very dynamic person, and always knew he was going to be an entrepreneur. And so when he said, hey, like, let's start to do something, I was like, cool, and joined, right? And like I said, what I've been able to do is learn how to become an entrepreneur.
Sure.
Right. And I think most people need to understand that construct. You're not born with it, right? This is a learned behavior. And there are certain things that I did not know walking into it. I'm humbled every day by where we are with things, and just knowing that, like, I have to continue to grow in the constructs and the concepts. So that's kind of my story at the highest level. We can dig into things more if you want
Don't
to,
worry,
but
we're gonna dig
cool.
And I know you went to the great UMBC. We all are a fellow alum, so great place there, and a lot of great people got to collide in that wonderful place. So great story. Pava, how about you? What inspired you to want to be an entrepreneur?
Definitely, and super happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
I spent most of my life utterly convinced that I was going to be a neurosurgeon. All the way, through high school, that was like my one North Star. That is what I had been obsessed with. And I had gone so far as to get into the Johns Hopkins University to study pre-med, which is, like the path that many students, want to take if you want to pursue medicine. And then about a week before my freshman year started, I was at home, and I distinctly remember the moment actually when I was watching some footage from the early Syrian war, and I was just kind of overcome with this feeling that being a physician is incredibly impactful, but it wouldn't help me address some of the bigger systems that were making people unhealthy and putting them in hospitals in the first place, right? And I realized that even though it is an amazing career, your scale of impact is linear. You can only save so many lives. And so I started to get really, into the idea of what are the different careers that allow you to have impact at scale. Mm-hmm. And starting companies was one of them because it allowed you to marry, quite frankly, the thing that moves our world most quickly in a lot of ways, which is capital, while also building products that can actually impact and help people. And so that was really where I realized that if I wanted to be able to have that impact at scale, I needed to look towards entrepreneurship because I knew I did not have the personality to climb a corporate ladder. And so there weren't very many options left after that.
No, what's interesting about what both of you have said, which is you started out with an idea of something very different. You're driven by really the substance or the outcomes of what you want to achieve rather than this design path. And really that allow for you to become entrepreneurs. But you had to start with an idea, and there's some steps because both of you have well-functioning businesses that allow for you to eat 3 meals a day and enjoy vacations. So take us through, how did you go from idea in your head to a business? What were the steps you went through? And John, I know you and your partner Delali went on that journey together. So, I know there may be some intertwining of stories, but how did you do that? And then I love, Pava, for you to tell us, you're saying you're going to be in neuroscience, you switched. Yes, power television. And then you say, I'm going to go through another scaling. So how did you do that? So John, what were the steps you went through?
Yeah, definitely multiple conversations with Delali off the bat, right? And I think we both drew inspiration from Jim Collins in his book Good to Great. So if you haven't read that, it's like a must read for folks, right? And in the book, it's an outline of what do some of the most successful companies in the world do, right? And there's one line in the book that Jim talks about. And he says the best companies know who they are, right, before they know what they want to do. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you can even hear it in Pava's statement, right? You have to know who you are. You have to know what kind of impact you want to generate in the world. And that's where we started from. We started from the premise of, building a diverse, workforce, right? We started from the perspective of we knew we wanted to build software that changed lives, right? We started from the perspective of, knowing what kind of customers we felt first and foremost could help us in that journey, right? And we talked first and foremost about the values, right, and the beliefs of the company, and then everything else from there just trickled down, right? It becomes almost stacking things on top of one another, and so that's been the journey for us. I don't know, Pava, what do you think?
John's trying to take my job. Hold on, John's trying to take my job.
I'm so sorry.
He's trying to take my job. That's what just happened. He's trying to take my job. I just saw that, John.
I'm sorry.
Jobs over here. Take jobs. No, just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
Hold on. No. But I want to just before we go to Pava, lift up two things you said. I love how Good to Great is just an amazing book for anyone who is on their journey, professional, personal, otherwise. But I love how you said you focused on who you are rather than what you want to do, and that allowed for you to build what were the component parts, what were the values. You wanted to build a diverse workforce. You wanted to have a product that changed lives, and you wanted to focus on the values that would drive the company, which I think, it's an interesting, just such a rich way to talk about how do you build, because you can sell cupcakes, or you can sell shirts, or you can sell anything. The values were driving. Great points, the nuggets that you just dropped. Pava, how about you? What would you what was your journey? What were your steps?
Yeah, so I actually had the original idea for EcoMap while I was a student at Hopkins, and it really came out of a problem that I was facing personally, as many businesses do, where I was trying to help students navigate Baltimore's tech ecosystem. And even though I knew there to be a very robust ecosystem in the city, it was really hard to know who was doing what and who existed in it, and what was going on. And I honestly thought that the problem was kind of dumb, right? It seems very obvious that we should be able to access the information about the ecosystems all around us, but we couldn't. And I became really obsessed with the why behind that problem. If it is clearly more beneficial for people to have access to information about what is going on in those networks and industries and communities around them, why haven't we figured out how to do that? And as I dug more into it, I began to learn that it was a technical problem involving, how hard it was to get the data. And so I realized that there was a way to marry technology to really solve that challenge. And spent a few years as a student really studying the market, following the advice that I was giving to students while running the incubator of do your market research, make sure people want it. So we did a lot of iterations on our MVP. And then when we finally put one of our, I think our second or third version out into the world, it exploded. It got, we got a ton of demand for it very quickly. I'm starting really at the beginning of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And then we were really forced to reckon with the question that John brought up, which is who do we want to be as a company and who do we not want to be? Because we realized, and my partner Sharad, my COO, joined me at that time to help us take it from this small business to a scale company. And we realized that we could take it through the high growth business model, raise venture capital, grow very rapidly. But there are a lot of perils to that. Right? It's very easy for companies to start to look very homogenous when you go down that path. It's very easy to create a very toxic culture. But I was lucky because I had grown up in this ecosystem, idolizing companies like Fearless, seeing very clearly that they put people first, that they had a human first company. And so that was really the value that I held on to as we went throughout this crazy growth. We went from 3 to 30 people over about 2 years. The North Star that I kept was just wanting to make sure that we were putting people first and that we were living those values. And that is something that I learned from just watching how much of a force Fearless was. But not only that, how much every single time somebody talked about Fearless, whether it was one of their team members or customers, the way they glowed. Right. And that is what we wanted to create with our culture. And we wanted to use that as our North Star to push back against the pressures that you get when you're doing a high growth tech business model. And so we started with the problem, but then we had to back into what we wanted to be as a company and how we wanted to run this. And we decided to do it differently than a lot of tech startups do.
I love what you just said. John, you should probably feel warm fuzzies. Aren't you glad?
I got goosebumps.
If you had been interviewing her, it would have looked like you planted that. See, I see now we know that was real. That was real from Pava. I love what you said. I took down 4 steps you went through. One, you wanted to help solve a problem that you yourself were experiencing, this void in the marketplace. Then became obsessed with really building that network. What did that look like? Third, saw that void and realized that the void was going to be solved through technology, right? Because things can get solved in many different ways, but realized technology was going to be that. And then 4, I love how you talked about this. And John, now y'all know that the path you're on is right, because really your human people-centered approach inspires other companies that are in proximity to you to do the same, right? And so that's ecosystem building, right? So how do you draw? I just love just the imagery of, in Baltimore, companies that are created put humans and people, put people first. Beautiful, beautiful statement for you. Oh, and everybody, I can see you commenting on Facebook. I will get all of your love and your high fives to John and Pava. I also get your questions. Those of you who are listening on the phone, remember you can text your questions in. The text is 22333. Type JHUWL in the message, then put your message. I'll get all of them and weave them into the conversation. Couple of questions. This first question came in on Facebook, which is, as they look at both of your companies, both of you have grown exponentially, right? You have had exponential growth. So what has been the role of, what was the core investing principles that you follow? We have businesses on here who they experience growth and they tell us what they do to experience that growth. Because you could extract money. As you bring money in, you could extract it, or you could extract resources from it. How did you invest? What principles did you use to grow your business in that way? I'll start with you, John, and then Pava.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm trying to think through all the things that we did, right? Starting off, there's a couple things off the bat, right? One is any profits that we had in the company, it was reinvested back into the company, right? And so, for most entrepreneurs, I'm not saying don't pay yourself, right? Because I think that's a mistake that most entrepreneurs make off the bat, is especially like young investors, like they don't pay themselves. Definitely pay yourself, right? But be conscious about your profits. And what we chose to do was take those profits and invest that back to the company, which probably leads it to my second point, is that investment back to the company came in the form of, how do we take care of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we came through we came with a whole bunch of different ideas and strategies, right? And once again, going back to the whys of the company, right? Knowing who you wanted to be, right? Majority of that investment back into people, was demonstrated through, like, how we thought about benefits, how we thought about compensation, how we thought about spaces and places to bring people together, right? About culture in general, right? And the kind of culture that we wanted to drive towards. So that's probably like where we started with the investment, and it's shifted over time as most companies do, right? Like, culture changes, values will always stay the same. And that's, I could talk more about, as it's gotten bigger, but starting off, that's what we did.
No, that's very helpful. Very helpful. Pava, what were some of the core principles you aligned with?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very similar to John in that pretty quickly we realized that people are what make companies go around. It's what makes them successful. And one of the things that we wanted to push back against was a bit of the unhealthy culture that forms at high growth tech startups, where people are like worked to death. And this actually, came out of an insecurity that I originally had, is that as the CEO, I work a ton. This company is my entire life. And I remember early mentors telling me that, like, you have to get your work life in order, otherwise your team is just doomed to have a horrible culture. And I didn't like that, because I wanted to work on this all the time. I loved it. And honestly, as a CEO, COO, you really do have to put in that extra effort, but it does not mean that you have to put your team through that. So we were really cognizant to make sure we were adding people to the team so that our team was not burning out or being asked to burn out, while also not just throwing headcount at problems. So whenever we would grow, we would say, like, all right, what is the root of this problem? Is it something that we can fix with process? Can we fix with technology? Or do we need to add capacity? And we would always be willing to do that, because if you burn out your team, you're not gonna survive as a company. And it sounds cheesy, but like, people are the biggest asset that you have. And so we always really focused on making sure that we were taking care of our existing team members and adding new ones, so that we weren't asking people to go way above and beyond what you should be expected to go on. Like, yeah, startups are hard, you got to work a lot, but we see some startups that burn their team members to the ground because they think you have to, and we don't think that.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point, Pava, in the burnout question, and leads me to one of the questions that just came in over text, which probably is in response to you, but how do you I don't even like the word balance because I don't think there is such a thing. How
There's
do
no
you
such thing.
harmonize your professional? Because you just talked about, right? When you are the catalyst for a business,
Yeah.
you can, everybody around you, you can almost make them feel like they should be in that catalyst. And also it's not healthy for you either. How did you strike a harmony? I'll start with you, Pava, and then John. How have you started this? Because you have to harmonize it at some point. What were the steps you went through on that?
So for me, and before I go too far into this answer, I want to do a disclaimer in that, like, this is not what every entrepreneur CEO has to do, right? And kind of that work-life balance can depend a lot on the style of business that you want to run. And when we chose to go high growth, that means that we are running and growing as quickly as we can. And really what I looked at was the calculus of, we have all the fundamentals that we need to be a very successful company that leads to a very successful exit, and it matters on execution. And in order to do that, I would need to be hyper focused and give a lot to this company. And so for me, I made the intentional decision that I was not going to have too much of a work-life balance, and I was very privileged to be able to do that, being young with no kids, no partner, no like house or anything like that. I knew that I could give the vast majority of my life to this company. So for me, the first part of that harmony was allowing myself to make that decision and not feel bad about it, because there is a group of people who will try to shame entrepreneurs who make that decision.
Yeah.
And I understand it, because there is a lot of toxic like hustle culture out there. But I had to first like come to peace with myself, saying like, I am making this decision to put this company above everything else, right? And when I came to peace with that, it was a lot easier for me to orient how I wanted to work and how I wanted my team to be able to work. Because I could explicitly tell them, this is what I have chosen to do as the CEO of this high growth company. I do not expect you all to do the same in terms of giving up that, big work-life balance. But I think it's a perspective that doesn't get talked about a lot, because people often like try to shame founders for that. And I've never really fully understood it. And I think it's important that if you do make that decision, you're just intentional about it being a personal decision and not applying that pressure to other people in your company.
Yeah. John, how about you? What's been your ability to harmonize it all, and also in many ways drive that sort of value within your company, as you talked about?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to something that Pava said in
Sure.
the previous question. But it flat out, like you said it, there is no such thing as work-life balance. There is no such, this is my personal take, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
the philosophy that I have is that life bleeds into work and work bleeds into life. And sometimes work has to be front and center. And sometimes you have to be cognizant and put life front and center, right? So it's an ebb and flow. It's not like a fulcrum on off. There is no 50-50 balance to it, right? So, and what we've done at the company is been very intentional to understand that value, right? If you have to call in the morning because you have a sick kid, cool, right?
Yeah.
That is okay, right? Life has taken over for the day or for the week or for however long, right? It needs to, right? And the way that you help people orient around making that mindset shift, or at least what we do, is we focus less about like trying to find that balance, instead talk about the outcomes.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, we're trying to get to this outcome, and then people can make decisions and choices about how to get to that outcome, and you hold people accountable to getting to that outcome, right? And then as an organization, what you can do is then you can, this is what Pop said earlier, then you can decide to make like decisions around capacity, right? Do we need to add more capacity because we recognize that we can't get to the outcome based off the decisions that people are making. And if you constantly just do that in a cycle, you'll be able to get to that, what I believe, non 50-50 work-life balance. Instead, let life bleed into work and let work bleed into life.
I appreciate that, and I agree. It's this journey of the ebbs and flows, and the prioritization is driven by what is important, and life is important, work is important, and And being honest about that is important. I appreciate that. Let me shift a little bit in our conversation because we're getting a number of questions about your business, and a lot of people saying go fearless. All right, I'll get all your high fives in. Don't worry, I'm gonna need them all in. But people are asking, how did you market your businesses? Both of you have pretty unique niches, right? You're not going to buy, well, I have bought Beeler shirts. I was in a commercial, full disclosure. But how do you market your business and your, filling that void that's in the marketplace? So John, how do you build your client business? How do you build your new client business?
Yeah, I think it's a loaded question here. There's a lot to it. I think the way that we've done it, right, is we haven't really been super intentional about like external marketing, right? And this, once again, this is a business choice that we've made, right? In that, like, we think that the best BD tool that any company can have is do great delivery, right? Create the best product, create the best experience, have the best customer service, right? Just be fully authentic and present with your customers, and that will help you in your marketing and growth way more than you shouting from the rooftops, right? And so how's that show for fearless, right? So we have to be really intentional about how we go about delivering. We have to be the best at that, right? At the same time, we have to teach people, like, what is the superpower that needs to show up because we're a services company, right? It needs to show up when we deliver, right? And we think that superpower is being authentic, being empathetic, right? Listening and meeting people where they're at. And so once again, just being very intentional about how we show up in our delivery with our customers is the mechanism that helps us grow, because we show up in a very empathetic and authentic way. So.
I love what you just said. I mean, my dad was a salesman, and he used to say, you can shout from the rooftops, you're selling great pie, but that pie better be good. Because you can advertise you're selling great pie every day, but if that pie is not good, you're not going to sell the next pie. So you're right. The work on your desk is the best marketing tool for the next. Pava, what about you? What's your marketing tactics?
So it's funny because for the first, kind of year and a half of EcoMap's like rapid growth period, we actually didn't market what we did because we weren't fully ready for scale. And so, it was a really crazy period where a lot of people messaged me and they're like, oh, how's it going with EcoMap? I haven't heard a lot from you guys. Is everything okay? And I was like, we were almost growing too quickly that we couldn't keep up with it. And so finally, once we got more resources under our belt, we realized that we actually have a bit of a challenge with marketing in the sense that we're what's called like a category building startup, where we have to build the industry that we sell into, because ecosystems is not an industry. And so it means that we have to take a bit of a different approach, because we have to both educate people on what the market is, as we also market, our product and what we do within that. And so I think part of it is exactly as you all said, we want to make sure that we are always offering the best product out there and the best experience out there, because then it sells itself, because customers talk about it and people experience it. And we have messed up at a few points where we put out a version of the product that didn't meet those goals, and then we, hustle to try to get a new version out, so we can always do that. But beyond that, we always try to lead with value in terms of how we market. One thing that I'm very big on is being respectful of people's time and attention, because we have so many things trying to take our time and attention. And so when we do this thought leadership and this marketing that we have to do to build this category, I always insist that we are actually providing valuable insights. We're not just like 5 ways to grow an ecosystem. We're doing research. We're actually putting out theory. We're really stepping up to try to deliver quality content that helps people work through this, instead of just, like the mill of content that consumes so many people's attention. So that's really how we're approaching it now. And we're still really early in those days with it.
Excellent. I have this one question, which is coming on text as well, which leads off of what you both have talked about. this person wrote, one thing I don't hear entrepreneurs talking about a lot is their failures. How has adversity and or failure influenced your drive as an entrepreneur? And the second question they pose is, should we talk more about failure and remove shame culture from the entrepreneurship conversation? John, I'd love for you to talk about that. And then Pava, it's true, we don't talk a lot about failure, but we feel a lot. All of us do. So John, get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think couple things, right? Trying to organize my thoughts. I think
That's that UMBC mind moving.
it is.
Let's see it. Let's see it.
Failure happens on the daily for me, like on the day.
Yeah.
On the day something does not work to plan. Things change, right?
Yeah.
I think what I've learned over the years is a lot of that failure stems from a couple different places, right? It stems from lack of communication, most times lack of alignment. And as a leader here at the company, it comes from lack of me being intentional about decisions or direction, right? And when leaders leave that space, like leave that gray space, right? That's when the rest of the organization will experience the failure, and then it gets multiplied that much more, right? So as leaders, we have to like close those gaps and be really intentional about what we're doing. Pava, I love like the intentionality aspect of what you talked about in your marketing. Like that is so spot on for me personally. And so yes, so that's what happens to me. Failures on the daily. I think also too for me, like what I've come to understand is that that's okay, right? And that once again, like leadership is a learned behavior, right? This entrepreneurship thing is a learned behavior, and you have to learn to be okay with that failure. And honestly, that just comes with the time, right? Not every decision you make is a great one. Not every decision you make feels great, right? And once again, you have to go through it a few times. Like what I often tell some of our, middle managers or whatever you want to call them, right? Is that like get in the habit of, and it's gonna sound weird, get in the habit of like thinking like you're a boxer and you're taking gut punches. Like you gotta build that stamina, right, as you're boxing to be able to take those body shots, right? And that just happens on the daily. And once you understand that that's part of the game, your mindset shifts from understanding and removing yourself about how you feel about things, right, to being more focused on, did I get to the outcome or not, right? So it's almost as leaders, we have to remove that blockers or those blockers and how we think and be more concerned about the outcomes. So I don't know. I rambled there a little bit. It's a hefty question.
I think you made some really great gems and really great points in this. One of our great mentors, success is never final, just like failure isn't. Right? Failure isn't final. There are very few times that failure is final, and that's usually is really final. But most of the time it's not. It is iterative. And Pava, I'd love for your thoughts on this, as you've even hinted and intimated at that. So how do you think about this concept of failure in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, John really hit it spot on. I used to think entrepreneurship in general, it's like sprinting up a hill with a bunch of boulders coming at you that you have to hurdle over as you climb up this hill continually. And I used to think that as your company grew, as you got more successful, raised more money, got more team members, that like there were fewer boulders or the hill got less steep. And I have come to learn that actually it is exactly what John said. You just get better at taking them, at either leaping over those boulders or getting back up after they hit you, right? And so when it comes to failure, what I had to learn myself, but what I always like to remind my team is that every single time that you fail, you make a mistake, something goes wrong, you're learning something. right?
Mhm.
You are getting better at dodging that in the future as long as you properly reflect on what happened.
Right.
But it really is a muscle that you have to build, because these challenges, these failures will never stop coming. And really, I think the measure of success, both for entrepreneurs, but also companies in general, is how good you are at just getting right back up and continuing on that run. And I look back on my, previous entrepreneurial ventures. I've started a bunch of things. Some of them worked really well, others failed, but every single thing that failed taught me something very important.
Yeah.
And we've tried to bring that into our culture, especially around not creating shame around it within our team, right? We talk about our failures as leaders so that our team feels comfortable saying, you know what, that was a failure. We're going to learn from it and move on. Because if not, you get this culture of shame, which means that people stop running forward because they're scared of, falling down. And so
Yeah.
it really is a muscle, and your tolerance for pain just gets higher, and your ability to dodge those challenges just gets greater.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you talking about how that gets embedded in your culture. If
Mhm.
you do shame failure, also it gets hidden, right? So the oopsies and the mistakes that someone thought was a boulder actually was just a rock or a pebble, and they're like, but it can grow into a boulder if we hide it and don't address it. I love how you said that. I love
Mhm.
this question because it builds off of this next question. I'm gonna start with you, Pava, and then go to John, which is question we got on Facebook, which is how did you measure success after your first year of business? And has that definition evolved over time? Pava, what I feel like I always start with the person who's like thinking the most about
Yeah.
so what do you think? What was your measure of success? This is John's question. Now John's probably getting somebody in the chat to do this. What was your measure of success after your first year, and has it evolved?
Yeah, it's actually super funny because my COO and myself, we always kind of talk about like how I give very unhelpful answers to questions, and he's like spot on. So like a sensible measure of success, at least in our, industry, is like, what is our recurring revenue and how fast does that grow, right? And, Sherrod, he's amazing with keeping track of those numbers, looking at growth rates, all of that. My measure of success is how thrilled are the customers that we worked with, right? And it's a much less helpful measure of success in a lot of ways, because there's like investors don't care about the thrill scale. But I know that we've been successful if I'm talking to our customers and they are glowing when they talk about, what we've done for them and what we've delivered. And so I think one really important thing to know is that not only does your metric of success change as you go from year 1 to 2 to 3, but also it's really important that you have different people in your company with these different metrics of success. Because if we only measured our success by our customer happiness level, we would not survive. And if we only measured it by revenue, we would be a very toxic company.
Mhm.
And so it's really important that you have different people minding different aspects of that, because it means that you are actually running at the constellations of outcomes that matter. And so, yeah, part of it is revenue, part of it is growth rate. But for me, it is how much are we thrilling our customers? For our head of people, it is how happy is our team? For Sherrod, part of it might be revenue, part of it might be retention. But what matters is that we're all looking at something and we're using that as a measure of that specific part of the business. And we don't lose sight that all of those matter.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love it. I love the blend, and that you are hyper focused on the achievement of your role in that. What, John, how about you? How did you measure success after the first year, and how is it evolved?
Yeah, I think like the way that we looked at the problem was not necessarily thinking about like the true measures, right? But instead, like we created a framework for how we would want to measure, right? And so we said that we wanted success for us to look like our engagement with our culture, our
Mhm.
customers, and our community. So we call them our 3 C's here at Fearless, right? And I can honestly say that like um, some of the 3 C's were clear from the get-go, right? Some of them not so much, right? Pava talks about the idea of revenue and that fast growth, right? Like that was a measure of success for us at the beginning, right? But through time and what I think most companies and what great entrepreneurs do is that like you get to understand who you are. You guys spend time to understand who you are better, and how you project like your voice out into the world, right? And when you are reflective like that, right, you start to realize that how you view what success is changes over time, right? And then that's wisdom, right? And so for us, what started off as, hey, a revenue measure of success, which is still there, right? It became more so around like, well, how are we actually building a, from a culture perspective, a diverse and equitable world, right? Or how, to your point, Pava, like how are we transforming our customers, right? It's not so much that we do the work for them, but do they leave better off than when we showed up, right? Hey, are we actually creating more technologists in our ecosystem when we talk about the community, right? So it shifted over time, and it really just became reflective of us being reflective, right, of what we thought was important in that framework. So
No, it's a really, really helpful journey that you talked about, right? So, how you build in the prioritization of all the values that matter over time, and you learn from that and you reflect upon that. Really helpful. One quick question I have to just pivot for a second is, how do you both, and you both are so interesting because we have, a two Black males starting a business, white female starting a business. Both of you, both of those businesses compared to other peers don't receive the amount of funding statistically that others do. So how did you seed your businesses? How did you build access capital to build your businesses from the onset? Don't tell us about your banker, but how did you build capital and build to be where you are today? I'll start with you, John, and then Pava.
yeah, honestly speaking, we haven't taken on any capital at all. So all of our growth has been organic. It has been sweat labor. Um, because of the business that we were in, right? Like, we had the ability to not necessarily have to have the need to take on capital, right? And so we just had to manage the things like, cash flow and whatnot, right? And so, but that's how we've done it. So
It's great. How about you, Pava?
So we started out bootstrapped, and there was a really big period where we didn't know whether or not we wanted to go the high growth route, right? The kind of natural growth that you get from revenues is really appealing in a lot of ways. And we realized that the reason we decided to take on external capital was because the market was actually so much larger than we originally intended, knew about. And we had the potential to go after that. And we thought that that was what was most right for our mission. And so we did kind of make that choice, but it took me a long time to want to go raise and venture capital and do the high growth model, precisely because I am a young female, my co-founder is a Black male, and as you said, those numbers just aren't there. And it's hard because a lot of people will hold us up as a like, oh, look, we are funding diverse companies. When in reality, we have incredible growth and revenue metrics. And at a certain point, investors look at numbers,
right.
But that is where the nefarious bias comes in, because in order to get the company to that point where we had indisputable numbers, I sunk myself into insane personal debt, right? We had to take on debt investment. We had to do a bunch of accelerators and pitch competitions and things that other founders don't have to do to get that. And so, yes, we did eventually get venture capital, but the path there was incredibly hard. We almost ran out of cash multiple times. We had to go into our personal accounts, and other founders don't have to do that. And so it is a little bit of a sensitive topic, because even though we are the beneficiaries, we did go raise a lot of money and it went really well. People who looked not like us, they could have raised that capital without anywhere near the amount of traction and revenue and growth that we had. And it is really bothersome when people hold us up as like, oh, the system is fixed. Yet year after year, when the numbers come out, they have not moved. In fact, they have fallen for female and Black founders in high growth tech. And so the problem is still there. It is still horribly nefarious. We are lucky enough that we got on the top of that curve. But if we stop growing and we stop making money, we are going to get the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
So
The rebuttable presumption. John, did you want to add something? I saw you wanted to add something on that point as well.
No, I'm good.
You
Spot
good?
on.
Okay.
Everything that Pava said was spot on.
Excellent. And so as you thinking about this, someone asked this question on Facebook, which is, knowing all you know now is a heavy one. What advice would you give yourself about starting your business? Right? You've had the failures, the successes, the journey, the benefit of now hindsight. What's the advice you would give if you could sit yourself back down and say, let me give you a couple of things, say a couple of things to you? What would you say to yourself, John and Pava?
Yeah, maybe we need to like go back and forth because I could tell my younger self so many things.
So many things. All right, Pava, you start. John, I'll keep going back and forth. What would you say?
I would say, even when it seems like you can't, take a step back and think. I look back to, 2 years ago when we were going through that very rapid growth, and there was a period for about 4, 5, 6 months there where I worked 18 to 21-hour days for months on end. And I almost killed myself doing it. And in that moment, it felt like if I did not do that, the company would fail. And I'm sure there were certain circumstances, certain deadlines when that could have been true. But now when I look back, had I taken a step back and slept and thought strategically, I could have thought my way out of a lot of that work. I could have gotten ahead of a lot of those problems. And so you get so caught up into the day-to-day grind that sometimes you forget that your job as a founder, as a leader of a company, is to take a very strategic look at everything that is happening. And sometimes that means you need to stop, step way back, and get out of the grind to make those good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to do that with the pace that companies move, but it is so important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. John, what's the advice you'd give to your former self?
Yeah, I got two things. The first thing I'm gonna piggyback off of what Pava said, right? Like, I think most leaders, especially entrepreneurs, right? Because like, either they're really progressive and they want to like do all the things, right? Or just like super hyper focused, right?
Yeah.
I think it's the responsibility of leaders to set the conditions for others to succeed, right? And I think that's the thing that I didn't learn, that I didn't know starting off. Like Delali and I thought that probably early on we had to do all the things,
No.
right? And in actuality, if we had just to your point, Pava, take a step back, think strategically, create the conditions, and bring on folks, or seek help or bring on partners to help get to the outcomes, right? That is what good leaders do. Set the conditions for others to succeed. That's the reason why you hear like Steve Jobs say, like, hey, the best things that I did, in my career was bringing on people who were smarter than me, right? Like that's the reason why that statement holds so true, because good leaders set conditions for others to succeed, right? It's the first thing. Second thing I would say is, I've learned this over the years, and this is my personal philosophy. People change on the daily, right? People change on the daily, right? And if you're not attentive to people, employee, X that shows up on Monday is not the same employee who leaves on a Friday. People change on the daily, and you have to be attentive to people's changes on the daily to get the best out of them.
Right.
And companies that tend to not do that tend to, not be successful. So those are probably two big things I tell.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I appreciate you saying that, because you're right. If you are attentive to your people, you will feel when someone is grieving, you're like, you have to leave. You can't grieve and work. It's just grieving. You have to get out. And I think the thoughtfulness with which both of you approach this work is just beautiful. And really, I'm excited. I've told Delali many times. Now I'm telling you, Pava, John, I want to one day. I want to be able to invest big in your companies when my pockets get bigger. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. To invest in Black and women founders to see them grow, especially in our city. It's really important to me. I'd love to ask this question, as we have confirmed that Miss Winfrey is on. So
Oh, wow.
ask this question anytime she gets to come on, as well as the other investors that are on. I saw you just straighten your Jazz's glasses. I saw what you did.
I did not. I did not do that. I did not do that. I just said something like
Pava, I
this.
saw you sit up a little straighter. I saw that. I think I did see it. But this question is, what is the advice to individuals who have the network and the influence and the platform of Miss Winfrey, but also for all of us who have a platform, even if we don't know it, and we have influence and we have reach? How can we help and support and be a catalyst for entrepreneurs like you to exist, to thrive, to multiply? What is our charge that you give to us of things that we can concretely do? I love this question when she comes on. So I love to pose this because I think it's a really important one from your mouths to really influence. I'll start with you, Pava, and then John on this question.
Yeah. So obviously our company is all about increasing access to information within ecosystems. And I think about that a lot. You know, one of the big inequities that we have is that some people are in the know of what is going on and what is happening and what will happen. And a whole lot of people are not. They don't have access to that information. And often, you know, it is helpful when people with a platform promote what people are doing. It is helpful when they signal boost, and that is all true. But I think what's under discussed is that one of the biggest levers that we don't use to achieve equality is giving people more access to information and not gatekeeping it. And also being strategic about, you know, what information might somebody know that they might not know. It might be information that you have, or it might be a connection that you need to make to get that person in front of somebody who can share those insights. Because information is one of those resources that we cannot quantify. We can't talk about giving more people information per se. And so it's being very cognizant of how the information that you share or that gets shared within your networks creates access for some people and not others. And so I don't know if that would be the number one most influential thing, but it is definitely an under discussed part of you know, social networks and power dynamics, is who is in the know and who is not. And out of all of the barriers that we have in the world, we don't need information to be one of them anymore. So even just thinking about that and starting to think about how we move in the day-to-day, how you gatekeep information or how you share it, I think that's really impactful.
Oh yeah, no, you said something so profound. It's one thing, it's a quote, I authored it, I think. People shouldn't have to live every lesson that you've learned. So if you have learned that lesson, why do they have to live it? If you can impart it upon them and they can elevate or radiate higher because they don't have to go through that journey. Yeah, that's just what you talked about, right? The gatekeeping of information. Beautifully said. Really, really important point. I'm glad you made that statement. John, what would you say?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it real here.
Okay,
right?
go ahead.
I experience, right? And so like Fearless has the opportunity to you know, support, mentor, and coach other, you know, minority-owned companies in the space. And sometimes that shows up in the form of just, you know, one-on-one conversations with, you know, our CEO and myself, right? And we also have the opportunity to like talk to individuals, you know, venture capitalists who are interested in investing, right, in these companies. And what I see from the investment community is a lack of thought around what companies they invest in, right? Like I'm a big Simon Sinek fan, right? And he has a book called The Infinite Game, right? And really the one of the premises of the book is that you know, business cannot be won, right? Like there is no finite, you know, end to business, right? And so he's trying to like tell the story that like businesses win by helping others, right? And what I don't see in the investment community is, and even for the minority owned businesses, is like it should be, I'm investing in this company because that company is going to pay it tenfold down the road.
Yeah.
Like I don't see that string pulled all the way through. And I'm not saying don't go and invest in Black owned business. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that, like, pay attention to who you're investing in. Pay attention to the ecosystem, right? That they're trying to build around them, right? Because that is ultimately how we fix some of the inequities that exist in our society today, right? It's not pick one or two. It's what is the multiplying force effect of the investment downstream beyond the investment. And I don't see that conversation happening enough, and I'd like to see it more.
I agree with you. I love what you just said. It's like, how is my investment in Fearless a multiplier? How is my ROI, not just my ROI for me, the ROI for the community, greater if I invest my dollar with Fearless and EcoMaps than if I invested with X or Y? Love that framing for this. I love for this. So this is my last question I'm gonna get to. Well, I have two questions. One's going to be to give all of your .com. Well, let's do that. Let's get all of your .coms and all of your ads. So give them to us. Everyone who's watching on Facebook, of course, you have them in the chat. Those in on Zoom, you have them in the chat. But those listening on the phone, I like to make sure they get them said out loud. So Pava, what's your .coms, your ads, your websites, all those things?
Yeah, I think the best route is honestly going through our company. Our social media is very much just our team having a lot of fun. And so you can find us on any social media at EcoMap Tech, so ECOMAPTECH. And then, me personally, my name is Pava. I'm a bit easy to find, but it's either at Pava LaPere or at Pava Marie on the socials. But the company is infinitely more interesting than my socials. So.
And your website?
Ecomap.tech.
Excellent. John, how do we, what's your .coms, your ads?
Yeah, so if you go to fearless.tech, in the bottom right-hand corner, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see all of the platforms that we're at. On Twitter, I think it's at Fearless, or at Be More Fearless, or Fearless Be More, one of the two.
Fearless Be More.
Fearless Be More, there you go. Yeah, so that's the company, and all of the things that we do and say and whys are on the sites. My handles are just like Pava. They're not that exciting. So it's John L. Foster and 2 on most platforms, and you can find and follow me there.
Excellent. Last question. We're going to claim this. Your best days are still ahead of you. With all you've accomplished, your best days are still ahead of you. So what is something that we can expect in the future? What's something you're working on that's exciting, that we should be rooting for, investing in, cheering for, supporting for you? John, I'll start with you, and then Pava.
Yeah, the company is really thinking through. We want to eat our own dog food. So when we talk about the multiplying force effect, right, of Fearless, right, we are starting to and having conversations and starting to implement around this idea of, like, when we talk about building a world, we're actually talking about building a world, right? So we're talking about what it means to expand into other places and ultimately expand into other countries, right? That is the path that we're on, with the idea that we want to touch things like 100 million lives, right? Like, how do we change 100 million lives over the next 10 years? That's the goal. Right, it's a very lofty goal. We have plans to get there, but that's the track that we're on right now. I'm very excited about this.
I love it. Exciting, really exciting. And both of your companies are in Baltimore. Pava, what's the next thing?
Yeah. So, our software has found so many use cases in so many different areas, from like entrepreneurial communities to industries, corporate networks, etc. But one of the big reasons I founded the company was my love for the Baltimore ecosystem, and honestly, like our hyper-local ecosystems. So we are, as a company, thinking and talking a lot more about what hyper-localism really means when it comes to giving your resources back to your immediate surrounding ecosystem or community. And so we're about to make a lot of cool announcements about how we're doing that in Baltimore, from opening up our headquarters and investing here. And so we'll be publishing a lot more about the importance of that hyper-local ecosystem-based perspective, especially as we go forward into an uncertain economic future as a nation. I think the time to talk about the importance of what's immediately around you is now more than ever. So we'll be putting out a lot around that coming up.
Yeah, I gotta say, for those who don't know, EcoMap is dope. You gotta go check it out. I use it on the daily just to figure out like who's in the city and who we need to connect with. So if you haven't checked it out, you gotta go do that now.
Oh, that's good. That's good advertisement. That's and I love seeing businesses support one another, and that's what both of you represent. First of all, let me just say it has been an honor and a true pleasure to have you on Entrepreneurship Matters, and just really grateful to have both of you in this city, and impacting the world. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Just like so much love for both of your companies, but also just for the way you're doing it. Because you don't have to do it that way, and you are. And so just grateful for that. Let me make a couple of announcements, then we're going to wrap up. Tune in next week to hear all about businesses in the specialty drinks industry. It's going to be fun. I'm only drinking water in that drink cup. Follow us on JH Connects on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, email feedback, jhconnects@jhu.edu. I want to thank all of our partners, Johns Hopkins University, Johns Hopkins Health System, the Hopkins Local, the Mayor's Office of Small Minority Women-Owned Businesses, Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses, and Bloomberg Philanthropy. Thank you, John.